Great day, learners. It's me again, Miss Bethel. So, this day, our goal is to be acquainted and to be more familiar with the different problem sets in relation to summation notation. Actually, we're finished discussing the nitty gritty of summation notation. I am doing this for you to be prepared for your midterm examination. I keep on mentioning rows and columns and our previous learning videos. Actually, summation notation, I defined it as the world of rows and columns. It might be or it seems overwhelming because we are actually encountering a lot of summation notations and it seems difficult or challenging. But think about it. If you are going to break them into pieces, especially double summation, and put them into table, then you would realize it's actually doable. It's not really that difficult or challenging. It's easy. You just need to have a process for you to come up with the correct answers. So this summation notation is not only applied in statistics. You can also see a lot of summation notations in other classes, in other courses like math and physics. So I am assuming that actually you may not recognize, but this summation notation thingy is not a whole new world to you. You've already encountered this 1,000 times ago since elementary. It's just that you tend not to remember them because they seem difficult or they seem challenging for your brain cells. So let's try answering this one. So summation of I as I goes from 1 to 6. We have the sigma sign. Let's try to dissect. Then we have this formula of the term. We have summation index. It starts with the first number up to the sixth number or the sixth value. Repeating again that I is just an arbitrary variable. You could use any other letter. It's doable to use. So for this case, since it's from 1 to 6, and we got this sign here, which is sigma, it tells us to simply add the numbers from 1 to 6. So this is the expanded form. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6. And the answer is 21. So the summation of I as I goes from 1 to 6 is 21. Easy, right? Very easy. So we also have another notation here. So this is what? Sum of squares or square of a sum. So this is actually sum of squares. So summation of I squared as I goes from 2 to 5, or the other way of reading this is summation of I squared from I equals 2 to I equals 5. But I'm used to saying summation of I squared as I goes from 2 to 5. So for this case, we know that we have how many values? Okay? 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 4 values. So it ranges from the second value to the fifth value. And it tells us that our formula of the term is I squared. So we simply need to square the values ranging from 2 to 5. So since the summation index tells us that it starts with the second value up to the fifth value. So 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared. So squaring each value and then getting the summation, the answer is 54. So this is actually sum of squares. Another thing, so we have here data tables. So the most common way to organize our data is to use tables. Because with this, we can actually visualize. So we have here the ID number. It ranges from 1 to 5. And we also have here different columns. So for the columns, we have west, north, east, and south. Usually, each column is a data set. So this one, we have column 1 for the west, column 2 for the north, column 3 for east, and column 4 for south. And these rows This one, the first row, the second row, the third row, up to the fifth row represents individual values taken from each set. Okay? So let's proceed now. Note that the values at the left side or the left set are just labels. Okay? They are not data. Please do not confuse. We have here 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You might be thinking that they are part of the data set, but definitely they are just labels. So you could use here X, okay, or you could use any other ID number or any other ID variable. Again, these are labels. They are arbitrary. Okay? It depends on you on what value or what number you're going to use. So we won't be using 1, 2, 3, and 4 plus 5 in our calculations. Okay? So let's try to identify first rows and columns because you might be confused. Saan nga ba yung row, ma'am? Saan nga ba yung column? So ito po, ang rows po, we refer to the values in the same horizontal line as being in the same row. Kagaya po ng ating upuan, okay? Kunwari sa stadium or sa theater or sa gymnasium. So like rows of seats in a movie theater or stadium. So please notice, these values here na highlighted po ng yellow are rows. So kung sa upuan po, ito po ang row 1, ito din po ang row 2, row 3. So ganun po yun. Okay? So for this one, itong mga highlighted values, these values are part of row number, yes, row number 2. You're actually right. So going naman sa ating mga columns, so ito yon. We refer to the values in the same vertical line. Okay po. Uulitin ko, vertical, horizontal. Pag sinasabing horizontal, rows. Pag sinasabing vertical, columns. So pag same part sila sa isang vertical line, ibig sabihin, similar po sila ng column. Same lang din po ng column nitong building na ito. Okay, so we have the column in this building. So for this part here, we have west column, north column, east column, and south column. Again po, the values west or the representation west to south are just arbitrary. So our task now is we are going to identify what value in the data table by specifying the row and the column. So what's the value that we need to find given the data on the row and column? Most common is row, then column. So remember, yung first subscript, it refers to the row, kagaya ng 2. Yung second subscript, it refers to the column. Okay? In literatures, in some literatures, they use comma. In other literatures, they do not use comma anymore. They simply write X rather, not summation. X subscript 2 and 3. Okay, or it means row 2, column 3. In some other books, please do not be confused ha. Baka may makita kayong comma, pwede nilang lagyan ng comma. So our task now is to find the value position, because when we talk about row and column, we are actually finding the position, okay? The value in that position. So what's the value in row 2, column 3? So saan ba yung row 1? This is actually row 1 and row 2. So now we know that now values 3, 5, 7, and 9 are part of the data set in row 2. Then it tells us to specifically find the value in row 2, column 3. So what is the first column? West. The second column, north. The third column, east. So let's try to find the intersection. So row 2, column 3 is number 7, or the value or the data found in that specific location or position is 7. That's why it's very important for us to identify what is the row and what is a column. Because if you fail to do so, if as the specific value for a specific location or position in the data table, then there's a greater tendency or chance for you to give the wrong value. Hence, in statistics, we use different values. So if you inputted wrong values, for sure, it would lead you to wrong answers. So let's try this examples again. So I would be giving you time to solve for this one. So find the value, okay, or identify the value in the data table rather, that column, by specifying the row and column. So for the first part here, we have X, row 2, row 3, column 2, then the value of X found in row 4, column 1, and the value of X found in row 1, column 4. In most cases, again, the first subscript refers to the row and the second subscript refers to the columns. Okay, so what do you think is the answer? Okay, so let's proceed for us to know the answers. So the value in row 3, column 2 is 8. So let's find 8 because row 1, row 2, row 3. So the values 2, 8, 6, and 8 are part of the data set in row 3. So it tells us to specifically locate column 2. So west is column 1, north is column 2. So let's try to find the intersection. Row 3, column 2, the value is 8. That's why we have 8 as an answer. Another thing is row 4, column 1. So first row, second row, third row, fourth row. Okay, the values 1, 2, 3, and 4 are part of row 4 data sets. Let's find column 1. West is column 1. So the intersection, okay, of row 4, column 1 is here. And it tells us that the value is actually 1. So I hope medyo kabisado na po natin. And then, the last one here is the value of X found in row 1, column 4. So, first row, then the fourth column is south. So, among the given data sets 5, 8, 9, and 4, of course, it tells us that the value of row 1, column 4 is actually 4. So as easy as that, pag po tayong malito, again po, it might seem overwhelming o medyo mahirap, pero pag i-dissect po natin into parts, we're going to break them into pieces, then for sure you will arrive with the correct answer. Okay? So let's have this. Actually, you're more familiar with summation notation. We will not be discussing this in statistics, but I want you to know that it's not only limited to summation notation because you might be encountering pi. Pi refers to product notation. Okay? So once we have a bunch of data and a way to specify values, we typically want to compute other values from them. Okay, so if we are already mastering the skill of identifying the value in that specific position, then we could now proceed to getting the summation or the product of those specific values. So a huge data set is impossible to understand, but one or two summary statistics are. So these are the sum and the product across the rows and the columns. Okay, now we need to describe calculations across rows and columns. The I and j values, again, are just dummy variables to change in the range specified below and above the symbols. So this one here, it just represents us that I is actually starting from the first value up to the third value. And for this another notation, we use j as the dummy variable. It starts with the second value up to the fourth value. Again po, I and j aren't necessarily, for this example, row and column. The order just determines it. Okay? The letters are just arbitrary. So, ang purpose po ng I at J dito is to give us the order kung saan nga ba natin kukunin or saan tayo kukuha ng ating value for that data set. So, for this example, summation of x I1 as I goes from 1 to 3, alam natin na constant yung 1. Tapos, yung I po natin, meron po tatlong values. So, simple, substitute lang po natin yung or plug in lang natin yung tatlong values dito sa I. Kaya meron po tayong mga ganitong values. So, x subscript 1, 1, but in other literatures, wala pong subscript up to this last value. And the same din po ng product na ito. Yung total po ng mga products. Okay, so the same lang po, i-plug in po natin yung values ng J na nagre-range po sa second to the fourth values. Kaya meron po tayong expanded form na ganito. So let's proceed now. So let's use those concepts by answering this problem set. So again, reminding everyone that these are just labels. These are not values included in this data set. So we have here rows, 5 rows, and 4 columns. Ang labels po ng ating columns ay west, north, east, and south. So in truth, summation is used much more than, of course, getting the product in statistics. So we won't worry about getting the product anymore in this learning video. We will be focusing on summation notation. So let's try getting this one. So summation of xi1 as I goes from 1 to 3. So what does this notation tells us about getting or representation of the row and the column? Kasi po, ang ating pong row ay merong summation index, pero ang ating pong column ay merong constant number na 1. Ibig pong sabihin, ang gagamitin lang po natin na values for the columns are the data sets found in the first column or the values found in the first column. And now, where's the first column? Is it west, north, east, or south? Okay, the first column are, or values in the first column are 5, 3, 2, 1, and 9. These are actually part of the first column. Another thing. Okay. So, it states here na ang gagamitin lang natin na values for the row ay yung values na nanggagaling sa first row hanggang third row. So, saan nga ba yung first row? Ito po ang ating first row, second row, at saka yung ating third row. So, it tells us again na itong tatlong ito lang ang gagamitin natin na part ng ating dataset. Kasi, ang sabi dito, summation of xi1, so ang value po ng x11, okay, row 1, column 1 is 5. Here, the second value is the value found in row 2, column 1. So that's 3. We have placed it here. And the last value is the value of row 3, column 1, which is 2. So substituting, because this only tells us of the positions or the locations in the two-way table. So we have 5 plus 3 plus 2. The answer is 10. So remember, if you know where the location, it's easier for us to specify the values found in each location. So for product naman, product notation, but we will not be focusing on this one, just to show you that this actually exists. It's not only limited to summation notation. Okay, so we have x1j. So it's the opposite kasi yung kanina, ang merong constant value ay ang ating column. Pero dito po, ang merong constant value ay ang ating row. Kasi nga po, paano po malalaman, ma'am, na row po siya at column? Normally po, in most literatures, nauuna po yung row, tapos followed ng column. So, row 1, ibig sabihin, lahat lang daw ng ating kukunin na values ay galing dito sa row 1. So, pipili lang ng 5, 8, 9, at saka 4. Tapos, ang sinabi dito, for the column, magsisimula lang sa value na nasa second column hanggang fourth column. So, saan nga ba yung first column? Itong west. Second column, itong north. Third column, itong east. At saka fourth column, itong south. So, ang sabi ay, gagamitin na value ay galing sa row 1, tapos second column, up to the fourth column. Ibig sabihin, hindi po kasali yung 5 kasi it's part of the first column, so excluded po siya. So, we will be using 8, 9, 4. Okay? So, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 2, north 8. We have here 8. Multiplied to the value found in row 1, column 3. 1, 2, 3. It's 9. So, 9. And then, last one is row 1, column 4. So, row 1, column 4, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. So, it's 4. 8 times 9, that's what? 72. Times 4, the answer is 288. So, is it hard? Yes or no? I hope the answer is no. So, let's try this one. The same or using the same data set. So, let's try to get the summation of x2i as I goes from 2 to 4. So, from this notation, we could easily identify that the constant number 2 tells us I am referring to the constant number that we can find in the formula of the term, ha? Okay, so x2i, this is the formula of the term. This is the sigma notation. This is the summation index I. It tells us that we will only include the values from the second column up to the fourth column. So summation of x2i as I goes from 2 to 4. Let's solve this notation. Summation of x2i as I goes from 2 to 4. I've mentioned earlier that 2 refers to the row, it's constant. Ibig sabihin, ang kukunin lang natin na data sets ay yung part ng row 2. Tapos, yung column natin ay dininote ng I. So, ang i-include lang daw natin ay yung column or values nasa second column hanggang fourth column. So, ito po yun. Row 2, tapos ito yung first column, itong west. Second column, itong north. Third, yung east. At saka fourth, yung south. So, 2 to 4 lang po. Kaya second hanggang fourth column na values ang ating i-sasali sa ating summation notation. So, ano po ba yung mga values na yon? So, x2i, the first is 2. So, x, row 2, column 2. Tapos, 3 kasi 2 to 4. After yung 2 ay 3, of course. Kaya x, row 2, column 3. At saka yung last ay value ng x na nasa row 2 at column 4. So, let's try to locate because we already know the location. Let's try to specify the values. Ano ba yung value na nasa row 2, column 2? It's 5. Ano ba yung value na nasa row 2, column 3? It's 7. At saka yung value na nasa row 2, column 4 ay 9. Kaya 5 plus 7 plus 9 is 29. So, ang sagot po, the summation of x2i as I goes from 2 to 4 ay 21. Yun lang po kadali ang pag-compute. So, how about this one? So, if you want to perform calculations using more than one row, kasi kanina po yung ating ginagawa, isang row lang po at saka iilang columns lang po ang ating sinasali. Ngayon naman, paano kung ang gusto natin i-compute ay hindi lang isang row at hindi lang isang column? Gusto po natin ay madaming rows at saka madaming columns ang isasali natin sa ating summation notation. So, best approach is of course to do double summation notation. So, please use this method until you're comfortable to have a specific technique for you to come up with the correct answer. So, ang gagawin po ay, once na ibinigay po sa atin ang double summation, double summation na notation, ay atin pong i-treat ang iisang notation separate as specific entities po. Okay? So actually, you could start with the right-hand side or the left-hand side. So, ang itinuro ko sa inyo sa previous learning videos ay to use first or to extract first the right-hand side. Ngayon naman, ituturo ko kung paano mag-extract ng double summation notation na magsi-start sa left-hand side ng notation. So, ang ginawa dito is nire-write gamit ang mga parentheses. Kasi ito daw yung pinaka-komportable at saka pinaka-madaling technique para ating ma-expand ang ating double summation notation. Mahalaga po na alam natin paano basahin ang double summation notation para alam din natin kung paano siya i-expand. Once we do not know how to read double summation notation, it's very hard for us to expand the said notation. So for this one, summation notation of xij from I equals to 1 up to 3 and j equals to 2 up to 4. So in this case, it tells us na 1 to 3 daw yung ating value ng I. Ano ba dito yung I? I tells us of the rows and j denotes the columns. So it tells us that in the values or in the data sets, we are going to include only the values from row 1 to row 3. And this another notation, this is a double summation notation. Xij is j for the columns who will only include the values in the second column up to the fourth column. So let's try to expand this one. We know that I ranges from 1 to 3. So summation, this is more familiar with us. This term is another familiar term for us kasi mas madali po sa atin na isang sigma sign na yung ating nakikita. So summation of x1j as j goes from 2 to 4. Kasi nga 1 to 3. So this is for the row 1. Kaya the summary or for row 1. And this is for the summation rather, not summary. Hindi to English class. Okay, this is statistics. So summation naman ng row 2 is summation of x2j as j goes from 2 to 4. Tapos, summation naman ng row 3 is summation of x3j as j goes from 2 to 4. Bale, ang ginawa natin, alam natin na rows 1 to 3 lang ang part ng ating summation notation. Tapos, alam din natin na columns 2 to 4 lang. So, kasi, alam natin na first row, second row, at saka third row, kaya ito yung ginawa natin. Ito yung para sa first row, ito yung para sa second row, at ito yung para sa third row. I hope that's clear with you guys and girls. So now let's compute this one. First thing is we need to locate, of course, what data sets are part if we're given this summation notation. Ang sabi dito, summation of xij from I equals to 1 until I equals to 3. And then j equals to 2 until j equals to 4 or up to 4. So, saan nga ba yung rows natin? Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. Ang sabi dito, row 1 to 3 lang daw. So, ang dapat maisip natin, ito lang pala yung mga kasali. Rows 1 to 3. Ngayon, tignan natin sa column. Sa column, ang sinasabi ay ang values na nasa pangalawang column hanggang pang-apat na column. So, saan ba dito yung first column? West. Yung second, north. Yung third, east. Yung fourth, south. So, ang sabi dito, second to fourth. So, ang second ay north hanggang south. Tapos, ang sabi pa, rows 1 to 3. So, ang ibig sabihin, ang kasali lang na values for the summation notation is the ones highlighted ng yellow. So, this is columns 2, 3, and 4 of rows 1, 2, at saka 3. Or this is another way of reading this is rows 1, 2, at 3 of columns 2, 3, at 4. Ba, ang dali lang. So, as I've mentioned earlier po, if we are overwhelmed with the summation notation, especially the double summation notation, the best thing to do is first to rewrite the notation using parentheses for you to be comfortable with it, or try to check on the two-way table and find those values. Let's try to break the summation notation into pieces and use tables for it to be more interesting or doable. So to answer that, because we already know the position, alam natin, ito yung mga positions actually. Columns 2, 3, at 4, at saka rows 1, 2, 3. Hindi lang po yun sapat na alam natin yung positions. Dapat, ang ating matutunan ay alamin ang position at specify yung values na present dun sa mga positions or locations na yun. So for this one, a summation of xij from I equals to 1 up to 3 and j equals to 2 up to 4. So ito po yung sa first row, ito yung sa second row, at saka ito yung sa third row. So going to the first row, ang sabi dito, summation of x1j as j goes from 2 to 4. So saan nga ba dito yung row 1? So ito, saan nga ba dito yung value ng j? 2 to 4. Second hanggang fourth value. So 8, 9, 4. So we just need to add it. 8 plus 9 plus 4. Tapos yung second, okay, second part ng summation is we are actually trying to refer to the values of the second row. So ito po yung mga values ng second row. At alam natin na columns 2 to 4 lang. So 5, 7, and 9. So ito po yun. We're going to locate their position. So row 2, column 2, row 2, column 3, at saka row 2, column 4. So it's 5 plus 7 plus 9. So 5 plus 7 plus 9. Tsaka yung row 3 naman, ito yung the summation of x3j as j goes from 2 to 4. So, ito yung row 3 natin. Tapos, second column up to fourth column, ito yun. Row 3, column 2, which is 8. Kaya we have here 8. Row 3, column 3, which is 6. Kaya it's written here 6. And row 3, column 4, which is another 8. That's why we have written here 8. So, we get the sum of all the values found in the parentheses to come up with this answer, which is 64. Ibig sabihin, ang summation notation na ito, ang kinakover lang niya is to add all of the values in the highlighted region. So, ganun lang po siya, no? Kahit medyo, nakakashock. Okay, nakakashock talaga. Shock pala yung term. Yung ating form or ating summation notation. Pero once we already identify the position and specify the values, wala na, easy na. Flat 1 na yung statistics. I mentioned earlier that the best approach until you are comfortable is to carefully rewrite using parentheses, especially if we are talking about double summation notation. But you should be extra careful because the order really matters. Okay? So if you're going to identify first the summation index and what does the summation index denotes, whether it's intended for the rows or it's intended for the columns. Once there are glitches or may nagkapalit, ibig sabihin affected na rin yung position or location ng values doon sa ating two-way table. So we can specify calculations using this notation. Let's have another activity. So we have here data sets. So example, what is the mean of the top two rows? So mean, when we talk about mean, or simple, it's just the average. So saan nga ba dito yung top two rows? Identify muna natin. Ito po ay row 1. Ito po lahat ng values na ito ay part ng data set included sa row 1. At ito naman po, row 2. So from 3, which is the first column, and 9, which is the fourth column. So we are asked to get the mean of the top two rows. So first thing to do is to identify the values, of course, and then we are going to get the summation notation. So getting the summation notation of this part here, it's this summation of, let's just say we'll use I and J as the summation indexes. But remember again, paulit-ulit ko pong sinasabi, na kung ganito po yung ipapalabas ko sa ating pong exam, kung tatanungin ko po kayo na what is the summation notation of the top two rows or what is the mean of the top two rows, pwede po kayong gumamit ng ibang index of summation or summation index. Pwede po kayong gumamit ng A, B, C, any letter po ng alphabet as long as tama naman yung range ng values na ibinigay ninyo. Pero ang pinaka-common po talaga na ginagamit ay I at J. Again po, arbitrary values lang po sila. Depende po sa human judgment kung ano po yung gusto nyo gamitin na letter for the summation indexes. Okay? So, because we are tasked to get the mean, of course, we need to get first the summation notation before dividing it by the number of the samples. So, in order to write the summation notation of this, we know that top two rows yung included. So, alam na natin na yung first value ng ating summation index ay nagre-range siya 1 at 2 lang. Tapos, alam naman po natin na ang range po ng values para sa ating column, which is denoted po ng J na summation index, ay 1 hanggang 4. So, ito po yun. So, galing po sa column 1, which is west, hanggang column 4 po, which is south. So, now, we are going to take note of the position. Again po, ang included lang po sa ating dataset is row 1 at saka row 2, columns 1 hanggang 4. So, ang position pong ito ay X11 or X row 1, column 1. Ito po yan, 5. Ito po ay total notation, summation notation ng para sa row 1. Tapos, X row 2, column. Tapos, alam din po natin, para po sa ating column, ang range po ng values ay from 1 to 4. So, ito po yun. Nakikita po natin na hanggang 4 po siya, tapos nagsisimula po siya sa 1. Okay? Or first column. Again po, position po ito. Hindi po ito ang specific value. Kailangan pa po natin specify yung mga values. First, we need to locate the position or the location. So, again po, highlighting na rows 1 at saka 2, tapos columns 1 to 4. So first is let's have the summation notation for the rows. So ito po yung rows. Row 1, column 1, row 1, column 2, row 1, column 3, row 1, column 4. So ito po yung mga values. 5 plus 8 reflected po dito. Plus 9 plus 4. Yan po para sa row 1. So ngayon po, row 2 na naman po tayo kasi sabi po dito sa ating I is hanggang row 2 daw. So, 3, 5, 7, at 9. Ito po yun. Pero paano po ba natin ito kinuha? Kasi alam po natin na row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2, row 2, column 3, at saka row 2, column 4. Ito po yung mga values 3, 5, 7, at saka 9. Now, we're going to get the summation of row 1 from columns 1 to 4, at saka row 2 from columns 1 to 4 again. So, 26 plus 24 is equals to 50 divided by 8. The answer is 6.25. Pero depende po yan, ano, pagka sinabi sa inyo, up to hundreds or to decimal places or pag sinabing whole number yung dapat final answer or di kaya pag sinabi naman up to tens lang. So be careful din po kung ano yung final instructions sa inyo ay ng iyong mga professors. So yan po yung answer. Kung ang tanong ay what is the mean of the top two rows, it's 6.21. But kung ang tanong po ay what is the summation notation of the top two rows, then ito lang po yung answer. Yung nasa itaas lang po na bahagi ng ating equation. So, mahirap po ba? I hope po hindi po tayo nahihirapan at saka medyo klaro naman po ang ating explanation. So, going back to this again, para hindi po tayo malito, ito po yun. Rows po ay horizontal, columns po ay vertical. So, ano po ba yung values or ng variable rather ng ating rows? ID po, ID number. So, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, at saka row 5. Yung columns po, yun po yung mga sets. So, set A, B, C, at D. Pagka tinanong po sa atin kung ano po yung value ng X2, 3, so that the answer po is 23 kasi row 2 daw, tapos column 3. So, first column, second column, third column. So, dito po yung intersection po ng row 2, column 3, kaya the value is 23. Kunwari, tinanong tayo, what is the value for X5, column 4? Okay, so the answer is x5, row 5, column 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The answer is 12. So, kunwari naman, tinanong tayo, what is the summation of I as I goes from 1 to 6? So, iba din po ito, ano? So, the answer is simple. We just replace I by values in the range. So, 1 to 6. So, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, it's 31. This is different po pala, ano, from here. Baka po may associate. Different po pala sila. Given this data set 1, we need to find the value. Okay. So, first thing to do is, of course, identify how many rows are found in the data set. So, we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, where are the rows here? So, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and row 6. So, the answer for this is 6 rows. Another question we need to answer is how many columns? So, for the columns, we know that for columns, we are trying to refer to the vertical, okay, vertical position. So, we have here column E, first column, color B, second column C, third column D, fourth column, and column E, fifth column. So the answer is there are actually 5 columns. Now, what is the value for x1, comma 3 or row 1, column 3? So let's try to answer this one. So to get this one, we need to do or to find the intersection between row 1 and column 3. So you know that this is actually row 1 here. And then column 3 is letter C because first, second, third. So the intersection between row 1 and column 3 would give us this value. So the position again is row 1, column 3. And we found that number 2 is the value found in that position. So the answer for that is 2. Okay? Or dos. Another is, what is the value for x3, comma 1 or x3, 1? So let's find the intersection. So first row, second row, third row, and then column 1, it's the first column. So the intersection, the value in x31 is 7. So the answer is 7. Another is, what is the value for x4, comma 5? So the answer is, let's try to check on x4. So row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. Okay. And it says row 5. So we start with letter A, of course. First column, second column, third column, fourth column, and fifth column. So the value that we're going to specify for x4, comma 5 is 45. So that's the answer. So ganun lang po siya kadali. Ano? Hindi po siya naman ganun kahirap. So we will try to answer these notations in our next learning video. See you all.